Okay, so this is the Cardinal Bust setup, and the original took me 59 minutes from start to finish. So what you're seeing here is like a 4x speed up, so it's 59 minutes down to about 10 minutes-ish. It's about 4.5 speed up, I think. And this is just basically blocking in the head, so starting with a sphere, pulling it down in an oval shape, giving it a little bit of cranium space on the side, and, you know, half the head down is the eye line. From the brown line above the eye line to the bottom of the chin is nose line. Thirds underneath the nose line to the chin is lip and cleft of the chin. And from the side, you want to make sure the eyes are pushed back. Insert mesh brush with Dynamesh for your neck here, and then a block for the bust just really quickly. And of course, you could mask and drag these things out and get the exact same result. Or you could just use an insert mesh brush. And so the Cardinal, I was originally going to go back and just kind of clean up the characters I'd already done, and realized I didn't save those files because I was just kind of messing around and doing some examples of what, you know, the kind of stuff I would expect you to be able to do after going through part one and using clay brush, standard brush, move brush, all the little tricks we've learned just to kind of do some basic sculpting. And I didn't save those files, so I was like, okay, I need something for marketing. Not really marketing, but just you guys won't click videos if there's nothing cool to look at. So I wanted something cool for you guys to look at, a little bit cleaned up, a little bit nicer, so that when I post the videos on Facebook or ArtStation, you'd feel inclined to click on it instead of pass it over. And I realized I didn't have those files, so I'm just recreating the Vatican Cardinal dude first, and then I do the dock worker, and then I do a Victorian lady, and then I do a armor sketch. So this was is about an hour. And if, you know, being character artist, I would definitely start out with a base mesh that I've already created, because there's no point in going through all this setup just to get to the point where I have a base head. So I would create a base head and just, you know, maybe a male, maybe a female, maybe just a neutral kind of head shape that has all the landmarks I want, and then I can quickly go in and change what I need to and make a caricature out of it, push and pull things around, smooth it out and make it a female, or change the head a little bit. That was me. You can do Shift S, and that'll make a screenshot of your tool, and then you can move your tool around. And so I'd use that to kind of give me a head length down instead of kind of measuring and guessing, which you can actually use the transpose line to measure. I never got into that, but those little tick marks on the transpose line you can use to measure, and it's in the preferences transpose options. But anyways, you can also do a screenshot, Shift S, and then move your tool down so you can get a head length down, and then that gave me the chest line. But anyways, start with a base head you already have created, and then just go from there, as opposed to having to redo this. And I end up doing that. So when I start making the dock worker, I start with this guy's head, and then when I start with the Victorian lady, I actually take this guy's head and smooth it out, and then use that as kind of like a neutral base head to build a female head off of. And of course, you wouldn't have to get this detailed on the bust area if you're just going to cover the clothing, but I figure, I mean, it's easy enough to do. It's just making indications with your clay brush and your standard brush, and it's basically sketching. You're sketching in 3D. You're just drawing lines on there and building up some forms, and clay brush and smooth, and you're done. Super easy. It's easy enough to do, so you might as well let's go ahead and do it. Just in case you need those landmarks, if you want to put like a, I don't know, a tank top on them or something. All your landmarks are there. That's what you really need, is just landmarks of where things are going. And this is this is the stern Cardinal, older gentleman, stern gentleman. He's got a little drier, a little wrinkly, and again, this is the low-hanging fruit I was talking about in ZBrush, where you really can't miss if you want to do creature work or old man work, or and you can do anything in ZBrush. You can create anything, obviously, if you look through the ZBrush gallery and stuff. But when it comes to just using the basic sculpting tools in ZBrush, like I've shown you up to this point in part one, you can't miss if you're doing like a creature or old man or old man creature. And again, we're not getting into poor detail in this one. This is just getting your ideas out quickly and kind of fleshing them out and sketching things in and giving indications of detail. and then you're going to use those indications to kind of, subdivide up once you get everything figured out, or take it out of dynamic mode and Z-remesh to get a nicer topology, and then go in there and start doing wrinkles and alpha stamping, alpha spraying, pour detail, stuff we'll get into in part 2, making your own custom alphas, and it won't necessarily be just for organic stuff either. I mean, ZBrush is certainly good at organic stuff, but you can do it for mechanical stuff. But this is more part 1, get your ideas out quickly using basic brushes, and you can do an awful lot just using basic brushes to kind of get sign off, basically. Concept it in, get it in the game. If you watch my GDC 2015 presentation, it's on YouTube, and you can, I guess, Google Michael Pavlovich GDC 2015, and you can watch what we did for, it was one of our projects. For what I presented, it was concepting out a character very quickly, hitting a one-button solution to kind of push it through Substance Designer, get it in the engine really quickly with one button push, and just evaluate it in game with animation on it, and kind of using that to dictate changes and making very informed decision, as opposed to in a vacuum, which could be anything from, well, you can't really evaluate this thing on a 2D plane, because as soon as you make it in 3D and you get it in game, you realize what silhouettes do and don't work, what details do and don't work, what materials, properties, what color, all that stuff that you need to figure out. You might as well just do it in 3D, get it in quickly, and then evaluate from the end result, rather than in a vacuum in ZBrush or on a piece of paper. Do it in Engine. In this particular case, we skip a little bit ahead here. I go ahead and mask and extract this piece off. We haven't gotten into that yet. That's going to be a part 2 type thing. But there's a ton of ways to create accessories for your characters or for your models, and I don't get too heavy into that in part 1. In fact, what I do most of the time for the rest of these type of accessory type things is I'll just duplicate his base body off, inflate it -1, and then just use clay buildup or clay tubes or standard brush or clay brush, and just kind of start sculpting up through him to make different types of clothes. And once I have that all figured out, I'll go through and mask, separate that out into its own subtool, close holes, re-dynamesh. So that's basically what I did here. Duplicate, inflate -1 for the duplicate underneath him, and then just start sculpting out, and it looks like you're just sculpting a shirt on him. And again, like I said, there's a ton of ways to do accessory mesh creation, and that's going to be a part 2 thing that we'll get heavy into. But for now, I'm just going to use a trim brush, chop his head off from the shirt duplicate, and then just start sculpting in what I need. And again, we're just indicating cloth. This isn't taking it into Marvelous Designer and making this beautiful, whatever they call this type of clothing. But you could certainly do that, and I would say yes, definitely do that after you've spent 10 minutes kind of blocking it in and making sure it's what you want, and getting sign off and putting it in front of other people's eyes and making sure you didn't miss something, before spending the hours to do it perfectly. That's what this whole idea is, and what this whole part 1 is based on. Is just getting your ideas out quickly, making sure you're making informed decisions on what you want to create before putting in the time investment into something that you might end up being, polishing a turd, or creating something that just doesn't quite work, but you spent hours and hours doing it because you put the hours and hours in and didn't realize that by the time you got to the end, it didn't quite work. Get in there, spend 10 minutes to make something, make a shirt, make sure it's what you want, make sure the buttons are number of buttons, the thickness, the type, the flow, where it's going to hang. Get that done, and then go, okay, made an informed decision, and now I can make the final, and I can base it on something that's tangible, as opposed to, I think it'll be cool, pretty sure. Get in there and make sure it is cool before you put in the hours just to find out it's not that cool. And that was another example of me duplicating the mesh off, inflating -1, and then sculpting the hair out, and then just masking and polygrouping and separating that into its own thing, deleting hidden, dynameshing, closing holes, a little more clay buildup, a little standard brush, and there's a ton of hair sculpting techniques too out there, and that we might go over in more of a project-based situation. So if I ever make a project of, hey, here's a character and it's got sculptural type hair, let's get into a little bit heavier of how to sculpt nice sculptural hair, then we can certainly do that. But it's a little out of scope for a part 1 head sculpt. And again, we're just giving indications just for sign off, just something quick, get our ideas out quick, and make sure it's cool and what we want. And again, obviously I'm turning off X symmetry down the middle. So you can turn on X symmetry to kind of do quick symmetrical sculpting and then turn off X-symmetry, especially when you're doing cloth down the middle. You might as well turn that off and put wrinkles across the middle that aren't symmetrical, because cloth generally doesn't hang perfectly symmetrically ever.